Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Created Equal, Ask the Cast. My name is Katrina Carroll Lewis, and I am the Artistic Director of Museum Theater here at Colonial Williamsburg, and I am here with three of my colleagues, artists, collaborators, and we are the cast and the creators of Created Equal. We're going to take some time this afternoon to talk a little bit about our process and then to answer some of your questions. But before we launch into that, we'll do some formal introductions. Again, my name is Katrina Carroll Lewis, Artistic Director of Museum Theater. I've been working at Colonial Williamsburg since 2011. And a fun fact about me is that I like to play the guitar and the ukulele.
Good afternoon, I'm Deirdre Jones. I've been working for the Colonial Williamsburg Foundation for 12 years. And my fun fact is that today I get to interact with the cast, but I also get to interact with you all and the technical people behind the scenes reading out your questions, so send them in.
Good afternoon, my name is Jeremy V. Morris. I've been working with the Colonial Williamsburg Foundation for 7 years now. Fact about me, I am also a playwright and an actor working in Richmond.
And my name is Jamar Jones, and I've been here a little over 6 years as an actor-interpreter. And a fun fact about me is that I enjoy sushi, and I move through life recreating moves from Janet Jackson's dance videos, which are most of them.
Which is actually really exciting to see, but we're not talking about that right now. We're going to talk about Created Equal. So Created Equal, the idea for Created Equal came in July of 2018 when we were reviewing our programming that we offered for one of our biggest days of the year, which is July 4th. And I noticed that we were really missing an opportunity to have a formal program that was exploring African American perspectives on the Declaration of Independence. And so I went to our director of Museum Theater, Cheryl Rochelle, and I said, this is what I want to write about. And she said, go for it, which is very exciting. A little bit about Created Equal. It is a museum theater piece that is exploring Black perspectives on the Declaration of Independence, the revolutions that the Declaration has inspired, and our ongoing quest for liberty, freedom, and equality today. And so with that, I'm going to pass the proverbial mic over to Jeremy, and he's going to talk a little bit about our process.
So at its heart, Created Equal is a devised theater piece. This means that from the ground up, you just bring in all kinds of different exercises. From the exercises, you take the inspiration that comes from that, and you find a place, kind of like putting a puzzle together for the things that resonate the most with you. As the four of us have already, for a very long time, had a rapport with one another working within this foundation and outside of the foundation even. This was fairly easy to settle into. Everything from our banter, our back and forth, something that might even just feel like a throwaway joke, found a place in this work. From that to the personal research that we on individual level and collectively have done of the 18th century, the people that we bring to life here every single day, some of the words and the opinions that have come out of the primary resource documentation that we researched to bring these people to life. Some of the words that have occurred to us in the writings that we've done previously have also made it into this piece. From there, we did movement exercises, writing exercises, just joke telling, truth telling, sharing our actual feelings and thoughts on the current events of the day. All of those different things and more found its way into this piece on these various different improvisational exercises, just our interactions, our regular day-to-day meetings and everything. But from there, we decided that it couldn't just stop in the 18th century with the question that is still being posed, what does this mean? For the over half of the population, specifically in Williamsburg, when they're hearing these words, the questions that they ask were very similar questions to the ones that we still ask ourselves today. Between those two times, more than 200 years has passed since the 18th century, we still have these questions being asked by the people that we interact with on a daily basis, the people that are out there speaking and rallying and talking and protesting for these rights and for justice and for equality. In between that time, you had the 19th century, the 20th century, into the 21st century now, where all of these people had their own way to ask the same question, had their own way to cry out and say, something isn't right and it needs to be fixed. So people from Frederick Douglass to Sojourner Truth to Ida B. Wells, all these different people who have trod the path that we are currently on, that paved the way so that we could even be here today. We took all of our cues from those people and from their feelings, from those passions and from those concerted efforts to see that one day the generation to follow, or a generation to follow, would be able to say that we finally have lived up to the ideals expressed in the Declaration of Independence. So what we've come up with, we're fairly proud of. We're very excited to share with you. But we know for a fact that it can't stop with this, that you know, in a half-hour program, you can only do so much, you can only say so much. And so what we have and what we have given to it, we pay homage to the people who have come before us and who inspired the work, but we just hope that that work inspires those who come to see it to make those next steps, and that we could continue to be a part of the conversation in that capacity as to how we finally reach that end goal.
Thank you. Now, in 3 words, created equal, how would we describe it? My 3 are tragic, American, hopeful. Jamar?
I would say raw, melanated, and truth.
I had to pick just 3. They would be honest, challenging, and real.
My 3 words are human, multifaceted, and clever.
Now, to just start wetting our whistle a little bit with the questions, what does it feel like for all of us to perform Created Equal and share stories of enslaved people during the active worldwide movement and the demands that are being made for social justice and racial equality?
Yeah, it's something you got to take a breath really quickly, right? But what I can say about us as a collective, and I can speak for my colleagues as well, our work here in our department, we portray these historical figures, and our hope is to tell the full story, right? You know, 52% of Williamsburg population during this time period, they were people of African descent, and the majority of those people were enslaved. So we, in our performance of Created Equal, we're speaking to the lives of these enslaved people. So what does it feel like? For us, we're living in a socially distant world. However, this is work as normal, right? Because we know right now we're seeing on our screens, social media, what have you, this quest and strong demand for true equity, equality in our country. However, our work has always spoken to that because that's just the history, right? That's just the life. And so this is just a continued movement. So what I would say as far as the spirit, I think the tone is we're still pressing forward. It just, I think people are paying attention more now because things are so timely, but you know, that's just what it's been for centuries, but we're moving forward.
We're also getting some questions coming in about our casting, and Mrs. Costello wants to know, how do you choose the cast members? And also, Michael is wondering, why is this creative group exclusively Black? And I want to kick off that question, if it's okay, and go ahead and let you know that we're actually a smaller part of a larger department of museum theater professionals at Colonial Williamsburg. And as Katrina and Jeremy expressed in beginning the process of developing this piece, we noticed a void, and we really wanted to fill it with the voices of people that we represent every day here at Colonial Williamsburg, and some people that we don't traditionally represent here, to really get people to think about other perspectives on the Declaration. I don't know if anyone wanted to add anything.
Sure, I'll speak from my position here as Artistic Director of Museum Theater is to help find the right projects for our diverse ensemble. Our ensemble is very diverse. But for this program, I wanted to pull together these 4 people because of the work that they've already done in this arena. And to be honest with you, we were under a tight time crunch. And so as Jeremy shared, this group of 4, we already had a rapport. We've been working together for quite some time. So to be able to expedite this piece, and I knew that these 3 artists would have wonderful contributions. So it was a matter of matching the right people to the right project, and that's what we try to do in all of our casting here.
What do you want modern audiences to know about the legacy of slavery?
Well, I would say it's worth examining. It's always a part of it. When we celebrate things like the 4th of July, you have to always think about, okay, yes, we have freedom for us and we're exploring that and it is something to celebrate. However, for myself, I'm often reflective. What exactly did freedom or the notion of freedom feel like for the people who did not have it when America became America? And that is the idea of slavery. And we know it continues far beyond the Declaration of Independence. And so what would I want you to know? It was a horrible institution. It was at the beginning, and it had long-term effects that we are still seeing today. It was something that people moved through. It was a traumatic. However, I also want you to remember the people who were enslaved. We say the word enslaved in order to give humanity to these individuals because they were not just their work. They were not just the value placed upon them. They were mothers and fathers. They were veterinarians. They were chefs. You know, they just didn't have those titles. And so I would always say explore what they went through, but never forget about the people because they were miraculous. They found joy through their pain, and they survived. And all of us here, we are a proof of that survival. Yeah.
And I'd also like to add that we all of us owe such a huge debt of gratitude to those who were enslaved. The work that they did for hundreds of years, they are the foundation of this country. And it's important for us to remember and recognize that. And that we're still, like Jamar said, we're still dealing with some of the things that were set in motion in the 17th, 18th, 19th century.
Thank you so much. Now, we had a few questions from our Q&A yesterday, or posted yesterday, as well as John wants to know, are there plans for Created Equal going forward, future performances and special runs, special performances beyond Colonial Williamsburg? And can you also add, well, I'll just go ahead and add, we have 2 more performances that are happening live this week. If you're local and you want to come see us at 4:00 p.m., tomorrow and Saturday. And I'll toss it to the cast for giving more about upcoming performances.
Sure. At this time, we are planning to have an encore run of Created Equal in September. Those dates are not quite finalized, but stick with your connection to us online and you can know when we're performing live. I'm very excited that we have the film of Created Equal that some of you were able to engage with yesterday and today, so that the reach of Created Equal can go further than just those that can come and visit us in person. Beyond that, at this time, I'm not sure. I'm excited to think about what the possibilities are and how we can expand our message and our outreach.
Thank you so much. I'm grateful that all of you are watching with us today. We even have some former colleagues of ours that are tuning in. Jonathan Butts wants to know if we can speak to the emotional toil that it takes to portray and do this work day in and day out. I will attempt to start. For myself, I've definitely been having a more difficult time recently. I find that while it is very rewarding and quite a privilege to portray and illuminate the lives of the enslaved people, I've been having a difficult time coming back to this work amidst all of the crises and pandemics that are happening. And it has been challenging for me to remember why it is important to do this work when I don't feel like I, as a Black person that's living right now, is being seen or heard or listened to. And I'm wondering, it's hard to wonder how I can illuminate and make people hopefully evoke some sort of empathy towards people who lived a long time ago if people don't have empathy for people who are right in front of them right now. And that's been very, very challenging. It is rewarding work, but it is a different kind of draining at the end of the day. I don't know if anyone else wanted to add.
Sure, I can add something. First of all, what's up, John? Good to hear from you, man. I miss you. Yeah, it's what's always such a frustrating thing when interpreting this work is that some of the responses that come from our efforts, our collective efforts, not just the people that you see here with you today, the people in our department, the people across this foundation, some of the comments and some of the responses that we get are very eerily similar to the responses of the
Yes.
people who came before us, to the same questions, the same actions being taken, the same demands being made, the same pleas and efforts to try to really hold the things like the Declaration and things like the Constitution and the idea of what America was founded to be, holding that accountable, that idea accountable, and saying we have been forgotten, we have been looked over as far as that's concerned. When you see the words that were spoken to people like Dr. King, when you see the words that were spoken to people like John Lewis, both titans of this fight that are no longer with us, when we look at those things and we hear the words that were said to those men, they sound very similar to some of the things that I've heard out here on the street. The questions that I'm asked or the responses that I get from some of the performances that I've done are very similar. I can imagine that Frederick Douglass was asked the same question. I can imagine that Sojourner Truth was asked the same question. I can imagine so many of the people that came before us that trod this path so long ago were asked those same questions, or told to wait, or told to be patient, or told how they should respond, told how they should be feeling the things that they're feeling. That's a very daunting thing to engage with. It's a very disconcerting thing to feel, that not only is the work that you do that does take so much effort, that does take so much thought, so much care, and so much toil, so much pain, so many can still look at it and say that it's not time yet to you. And how many people, were children and heard it's not time yet? How many were adults and heard it's not time yet? How many had to look at their children and say, I was told this and now you're being told the same thing? How many grandparents? And so it's just the over the time that has eroded down so many different people, so many different hopes, and so many different efforts to find just that level ground that was always promised in this country. It can really make you tired. It can really make you upset. The response that we have to that is this work, and that the only thing that really does keep me going at the end of the day, as far as being able to do this work, is recognizing that it can't be too hard for me if it wasn't too hard for the people that came before me, because I know for a fact it's much harder. It was much harder back then for them than it is for me now. And that's because of how hard they pushed. That's because of how much they sacrificed. So how dare I complain about how hard it is? It's hard because it's right, and it's hard because it's worthwhile. And they didn't give up, so I can't either.
And I'll say that we work to acknowledge the emotional toll that this work takes on us, and try to bring that into our process of team building, of creating a space for us to talk about what we experience as we're processing this material, as we step into the role of enslaved people. So we work to take care of each other, and acknowledge that it's not easy. But like Jeremy said, what we are doing pales in comparison to what some of our ancestors had to deal with.
So Michael wants to know, how can you interpret the complexity of slavery without the slave trader or the overseer and the masters?
That's a great question. So, some questions that we often get when we are portraying our historical figures on the streets and we're expressing our viewpoints and character. It will be, where is your master, or how can you do this? Do you have permission to do that? Now, the one thing I often tell people is always remember that people are people, right, throughout time. So where am I going with this? We have all different modes of coping and things of that nature. And you have to keep in mind, these enslaved people were moving all throughout this city all the time. They had work to do, right? You had people who were carters. They were traveling. They were driving, moving, on the carriages. They were handling record books. They were cooking. They were going to market to pick up things. So their owner or their enslaver was not directly with them all the time because they have to move about during these chores and tasks. So what our task is to bring this city to life. What we reflect here is what you would think of as urban slavery and versus rural slavery, what, out in the plantation, working tobacco fields and things of that nature. But here in the city, we are always interpreting these masters and mistresses, talking about what they're doing because by them owning these people, they are affecting their life. So their journey is that ownership, if you will, is affected by our characters' perspective, and so we do talk about it. But they had to move about their daily life.
And to add to what Jamar is speaking to, it is everybody's responsibility that works at Colonial Williamsburg to express as much of the full society as they can. So the onus doesn't just fall on us as African American people who are portraying enslaved people to make sure that our guests have an understanding of the slave society that Williamsburg was in the 1770s, or colonial Williamsburg time, whatever you would. I always think 1770s. It's what we really focus on, but we go before and after that. So it's everybody's responsibility, and I say as a Black woman, I can't tell this story on my own. It's not a Black story, it's an American story. So everybody is responsible for helping us all to understand.
And just to add on to that, anytime you go to see Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, any nation builder that owned enslaved people, those are masters that are being portrayed and that are being shown. And I hope that you also turn that question to them, where are their enslaved people? And find out more about that part of the story, because it is very interconnected. Thank you so much, Michael, for your question. I want to go to Emma's question. She wants to know, is there something that you wish was said in the program that couldn't be said either due to constraints of time or any other constraints?
We pack a lot in there in 33 minutes.
We have a file waiting. We should get it out to you, a file with all the additional material.
Oh no, please. Yeah. So much.
I think that with this program, I feel good about what we got in there. I mean, we know as playwrights and as artists that we could go on. We could write a 2-hour play about this subject matter, but we have to be selective and we have to pick and choose. So I think that if we were reevaluating this piece, I would want to bring in more voices of Black women into the piece.
Yes.
We do quote Sojourner Truth, and of course Deirdre and I portray 18th century women who were enslaved, but I would want to bring in more of those voices.
And I would just like to add something that some names you might not have seen in our film version if you notice it, but during the pouring of the libation at the top of our play, we do that to invite the ancestors in, but also to honor the people of why we're doing this piece, right? And we often, every performance, sometimes our names alternate, but sometimes we say the female names like Shirley Chisholm and multiple names. So that's another way that we often invite and speak different names each time we perform.
I think that we have time for maybe a few more questions. I'm going to toss Margaret's question of, do you think that Lin-Manuel Miranda's Hamilton, and more specifically its recent release on Disney Plus, has accelerated the national discussion of Black persons' contributions to our American history? And how has it affected our department at Colonial Williamsburg? How has it affected it?
Accelerated. I think it's recontextualized it a little bit. It's definitely made people imagine the way in which these individuals expressed themselves and the situation that they were in, as far as, especially in the national discourse currently as it stands upon immigration. When we speak about who is actually, from here and who, what is a citizen or what is an American when it comes down to it. This person who advanced or, made so many contributions to the founding of a nation that he wasn't in the beginning from when it comes down to it. There's a different way of looking at it now that I don't suppose everybody got a chance to say that these human aspirations, what's the word? The ambition to become greater than one's situation that they were brought into. That is a very universally American story when it comes down to it. It has only been attributed to certain people. Only certain people have been allowed to wear it as such, in such a way that they can claim a pride in it, to say that this man came from almost nothing to a place of prominence. Everyone wants for that to be their story when they say that they have to follow their ambitions and work hard enough to bring themselves into a better situation. When when people are being very simplified in the idea of it, that's what they call the American dream. This is something that was allowed for a great many people, and this was something that was denied even more people over a very long period of time, and simultaneously with one another, to say that these kinds of people can advance in such a way, but these kinds of people cannot. And to the discourse around why that was, and the discourse around how long can we go allowing it to be that way before we just have to say what it is, that this is wrong and that we have to change it, or else we are no longer the people that we have claimed ourselves to be, saying that we are the truest and brightest example of freedom and equality and justice and everything like that we have associated so long with the American dream and the American ideal. So when we speak about the enslavement of these people, the people that are represented in Hamilton, or the characters, the actors that play these characters, being part of that part of the population who would have been enslaved and would have been subjugated and would have been beholden to certain laws that were written by the characters that they portray, that kind of changes the way that you have to look at it. How is it that now these people who were once considered less than human are now able to tell that story in the same capacity as their white counterparts always have been able to? So I think that changing the way that people look at it was a really interesting thing. I don't know that it accelerated, per se, the conversation surrounding it, but to say that now people have to really look at it for what it is, and the fact that the people that were portrayed in such a light that not everyone was happy with, and said that it wasn't in the fullness of who they actually were, because many of them were slaveholders. In that, to recognize that same struggle and that same ambition and that same wanting and longing to be equal and wanting to be able to pursue happiness in the way in which one wishes, it's an exciting prospect, or it was, I believe, from that particular work, an exciting prospect to say that maybe we had reached that point, or maybe that we had gotten closer than we ever had before. So in the imagination, in the artist's world, I think that's more so or at least what I took away more so from it, is just having to really look at it differently and say that these people all wanted the same thing. So how has it been this long that they have actively denied it, where it came to well over half of them, in the case of Williamsburg, well over half of their population, or the people that they had enslaved to them for so long. So that's my thought on it.
And I'd say that Hamilton hits a bit different in 2020 than it did in 2015. So that's what I've really been interested in seeing, it was such a novel thing in 2015, and we were different and a little more innocent than in 2015. But now in 2020, looking at Hamilton, all of the things that Jeremy so eloquently said, but also it's coming under even more criticism about its handling of slavery and about the history. I think because our culture, the zeitgeist, is really trying to look at this in a more I don't know, in a better way, in a more inclusive way, in a more honest way.
Yeah.
And I will say that one of the cool things about Hamilton too is that some young people that weren't really interested in the 18th century are now like, hey, I'm so into this because of Hamilton. So.
Thank you. We got a question about how can, and if this can be kind of brief, how can, Emma says white guests, but I'm going to say how can all guests do a better job interacting with Black public history at Colonial Williamsburg and places like it? And I just want to start off by saying, talk to us, and that's why I wanted to amend it to be all guests. Talk to us, treat others the way that you want to be treated. So when you come up to us or others of our colleagues, because not everyone is in character, and it might take a moment to figure out who's in character and who's not, but we're here to talk to you and educate you and share with you about the Black experience and about a more diverse experience at Colonial Williamsburg than what you may have gotten previously. Did anyone want to add?
No, I agree.
All right. Okay, so our time is winding down. It's been really wonderful sharing with you, and those of us that created a part of this cast are not just standing on our own. We do realize that we are standing on the shoulders of those who came before us, not only here at the foundation, but also ancestors like those that we call out. And we just want to take a moment to recognize that this day we are funeralizing one of our new ancestors, John Lewis. Ashe, we remember you, and we hope that if you don't know who that is, that you'll take a moment to look him up. But Doug transitions us nicely into our final thoughts. Do we have hopes for what we hope people will take away from this experience, and any other thoughts that we want to share? And I guess I'll keep talking a little bit and say that it is an honor and a privilege and a challenge for me to try to evoke for people a little bit of the humanity, hopefully a whole lot of the humanity of people who lived, who were enslaved. And it's not something that I take lightly. It's something that you're constantly researching and you're constantly digging into, and I'm constantly examining how can I do this story more justice. And I want guests to know that they lived and that we wouldn't have any of this beauty and complexity at Colonial Williamsburg and all of the documents that helped to found this country and all of the things that we celebrate about being American without people like the enslaved people and the Black people and all the other diverse people that helped to build and found this nation. And so I'm very, very grateful for that, and I'll share.
Well, I'll say I'm grateful for our collective, not just the collective that you see on camera here, those working behind the scenes and who are committed to telling the whole story and pushing forward what some might deem to be this idea of a new kind of history, but nothing's new. Things are often just unearthed, right? We're beginning to explore things fully. I know for myself growing up here in Virginia, if I just solely relied on my education that I did receive in public schools, I wouldn't know anything about the people I portray here. I wouldn't know that Thomas Jefferson had a manservant named Jupiter who attended him, who I've had the opportunity to portray. And I bring up those names because my hope is that you don't stop here at Created Equal. My hope is that people go far beyond this program and go dig for every name that you heard in our piece, because they all were real people, right?
Okay.
Explore about the people who they were owned by or who caused struggles for them. I encourage people to also just continue to further their research and perhaps be willing to open their perspective, because foundationally, a lot of us are educated to only have one side or missing a large parts of our collective experience, our collective history. And I hope that through more exploration and as museums continue to be committed to those telling these stories, representing these stories, that we really can push for further understanding and healing the trauma that still exists, all the way from the people who experience it to those rippling effects that we have today. So that's my hope and desire.
I agree with that. I had a thought earlier that it was just a hope that we were soon approaching the day when we could speak about this history just to remember it and not to place something in front of the people of this country that says, here's why we should no longer be having these conversations, here's why we should no longer be demanding justice or demanding equality. That one day it could be simply that we teach to remember that these were the people who pushed us toward that equitable society, that the people that finally helped us realize where we were and how we could fix it. So I'm looking forward to that being the day where that being something in our very near future where we can just say we remember it as it was, and now we finally reached that time where we can all see each other as countrymen and see this whole picture as our collective history that we have learned from, that we have successfully come through, and that we can, we can move on, we can move forward together.
Yes.
I agree wholeheartedly with everything that my fellow castmates have said. And I'll just add that my hope is that when people see our play, some empathy is sparked within them, that they see these human beings that are wrestling with some really difficult things, but what happens is that they come together, and that as much as this is a calling to task our history, it is a celebration of humanity. And so with that, does anybody have any other final thoughts?
Please come see us, come visit us, not just
When
this
can they
work
see us?
here.
Will you echo when they can see us?
When,
Yes.
if you're local, tomorrow, Friday, and Saturday at 4 o'clock, weather permitting, September, there'll be some dates, not finalized. Check Colonial Williamsburg, but also please support all the programming happening here. We're not, the only thing, I know it's different now because it's socially distant, but we're here.
Here.
We're here.
We are here. We are telling the stories. We are always working to do it with integrity, with our safety and your safety in mind. So come check us out. And so with that, on behalf of the Created Equal cast, we thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. We hope that you have a beautiful day. Thank you so much.